A while back, I had just ended a campaign and had a free slot to start up a new one. So I went to Reddit to look for people for the next campaign. One response was from someone whose Reddit comment history seemed alright, so I contacted them to talk further about the campaign. They insisted on a voice chat, which I was fine with, since typing is generally slower than talking. But they kept putting it off until their boyfriend was available for the call. Not too odd, since they'd said that both they and their boyfriend were looking for a campaign. Well, we start the call, and it starts off decent enough. We talked for a couple minutes about what the campaign was going to be, and then they said that they had a few questions. Fair enough. But after the second question, it started to feel like they were reading off a script. They'd ask a question, I'd answer it, and they'd say, okay, and then pause a moment as if they were taking notes. Not necessarily a bad sign. They'd ask me how long I'd been a GM for, what systems I'd run, and if I'd run this campaign before, etc. All with an, okay, and a pause afterwards. But after a few questions, it started to feel like I was at a job interview for a campaign that I was willing to run for free. And then they asked me, "So, what would you say your greatest liability is as a DM?" With me barely holding back my laughter, I ended the call. But not before they said they'd get back to me in a couple days. It was more like a week before they got back to me. But the campaign had already filled up. It had its first session by then. I still see them from time to time on the various LFG channels, looking for a campaign to join. I do hope they find one someday. At any rate, they do have a bright future ahead of them in middle management. If this is how this couple vets a dungeon master, you better believe there's going to be a second interview. So, I noticed on your resume there's a 2-year gap of game mastering between 2016 and 2018. Would you care to talk about that?
I mean, 5th edition just came out and I wanted to play first before I started.
Right, listen, we really appreciate you coming by, but we're going to be exploring some other options and we'll circle back to you with a response in 30 days. Does that sound okay?
The campaign starts in like 2 weeks. I wrote that in my post.
Right, yeah. Can you send the next one in? We'd really appreciate that. My name is Jacob Crow, and welcome to the Crow's Perch, where each week I pit my sanity up against the worst RPG horror stories on Reddit.
I heard your cringe is strong. Let me fight it. Ugh!
In today's story, well, we all like stories, right? And sometimes when we run a game, it can often feel like we're making our own book or movie with the story that we tell together. Except the writing is a bit inconsistent, there are a ton of contrived story developments that really feel like you added them in at the last minute, and completely out of left field racial overtones and weird political commentaries about stuff you really didn't know much about, but felt like you had to add them in to make the story feel more mature, even though you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. What's this copy of Harry Potter doing here? I was talking about a tabletop game. Anyway, let's try to stay on our own turf here, which is something this DM definitely doesn't do, as he goes on to make sure his sessions play out not like a game, but a novel. So, without further ado, let's turn the page to the first chapter, as we gather up a murder and dive right into this story. Context. I'm part of a TTRPG club of a geeky company, with around 40 to 50 people, I guess, all in their 20s or 30s, in which members can organize tables, campaigns, one-shots, etc. Systems are plenty. Dungeons and Dragons there, but in minority. Powered by the Apocalypse, Forged in the Dark, Vampire the Masquerade, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, one-page RPGs, etc. Very varied. In that context, a member, regular player from some other tables, was recruiting up to 4 people for a medieval fantasy one-shot. Only one session. In the recruitment announcement, they were giving some details. Only one session. There is already one player recruited. Their forever GM from a D&D campaign as a player. A nice person with quite good communication skills. They search for 2 to 3 more players. Homebrew medieval fantasy setting, but a tame one. We play as merchants in a besieged city in a human kingdom. New game master, a bit nervous. System is a barebone homebrew system, with nothing exotic. It is very roleplay driven. We were 3+ club members to answer the message. Myself and 2 other people I like to occasionally play with. Both grown adults with a good mindset. Their other player mentioned confirmed their participation, and we all scheduled a day to play together, and joined the table online via Discord at the 20th hour. We say hello. The GM starts by saying we will need to stop by the 23rd hour. Fine, we are all good with it. It gives us a solid 3 hours of time for apparently a small one-shot. So, fine after all. GM then starts to pitch us the world and the main events that happened in the last couple of centuries, showing us a whole continent world map made on Incarnate and all. After almost 10 minutes spent on this, I interrupt politely, asking which type of game system we will use, as I would like to know this first. Them being a new GM, I expected pacing wouldn't be mastered at this stage yet. I tried to help a bit without being too forceful. GM waves the question awkwardly, saying there is no system at all. This will all be GM adjudication from start to finish. I insist to at least understand which type of game activities will be done during the session, not wanting things like tactical combat done with no rolls. And they confirm there won't be any. And no rolls either. No hit points, nothing. Entirely roleplay. Look, I've played diceless games, but I've yet to see a statless game. No character sheet. That's definitely a new one for me. But maybe this guy unlocked the secret to all roleplaying ever, and created a never-before-seen system. But something tells me that's not the case. Let's keep going. It was a first oddity. Straying from the promise of a bare-bones system, I was expecting at minimum a resolution system. Now interrupted in their lore exposition, GM explains we play as merchants from the common, points on the map a little city, says everything will happen there, and then GM resumes the general world and history background lore exposition for a few more minutes. And we let them have it. But listening to it, it is obvious it will have no impact on the session. This is mostly past events, far from each other, involving many factions, resulting in kingdoms being at war for a very long time. It explains the besieged city we start in, but while answering a player question, GM states that we will not be there to change or stop the siege. As GM finally speaks about us, the PCs, I ask them if we can create characters, and GM answers that we just choose from pre-generated ones, which is fine to me for a one-shot. I was a bit worried the long intro addition to character creation would have taken half the session length. We have 4 merchants, each with names and specialty shops, to choose for us 4 players. No info, no stats. Nothing more than names and a specialty shop. Seems fine. Looks to me like we will have plenty agency to make them our own. This seems cool. I picked the jeweler merchant that also sells clockwork. I remember another player picking a weapon seller. Spears, parade shields, swords, this type. The 2 others' merchant details have no impact, so let's skip. We learn that we either don't have anything left to sell due to the siege, or no clients, and no money anymore, and are starving. Our characters turned to black markets since the last few months. The initial situation is us hidden in a sea cave, speaking with smugglers. They have been paid by someone overseas to deliver a small parcel. Some long wooden box, sealed, the size of a hand, to an aristocrat of the city, but they cannot leave their boat for reasons, and will share half of the reward with us if we finish the delivery. Smells like a framing or a trap, but we are poor, hungry, desperate merchants, not paranoid adventurers. So we are in. Our characters said yes, and the one-shot starts at this point. We immediately get a long GM description about the smuggler's boat, then a long description about the sea cave we are in, a long description about the enemy armada that surrounds and besieges our city, A long description about the damaged district our shops are located in. A long description of how the life is miserable here since the siege started. We get a long description of a particular shop near ours, but not for our shops. Clearly, GM has trouble with the concept of giving us the spotlight. Through their descriptions, they apparently made us leave the cave and get back to our district without asking us, / letting us have some agency yet. 50 minutes in, and no player had an opportunity to make their character do anything yet. At this point, I interrupt again, asking what we know exactly about the item we carry, and the aristocrat individual we need to deliver it to. At this point, we didn't get the NPC name yet. GM shares with us the name of the aristocrat. Let's call him Sir Aristo, and GM stops there. No more info. Finally, a silence for us to fill. So I start discussing out of character with the other players, proposing that we should go straight to the home of this aristocrat as a solid first step, without separating the group, preferably, to make sure every player can get a part in that. GM stops me, saying that we cannot go to the aristocrat's house. We never heard about this aristocrat's name and don't know where he lives, as we are not part of the aristocratic world ourselves. I argue that as a jewelry and clockwork seller, I guess I have at least heard about them, and maybe they are even part of my clients, or at least through servants working as intermediaries. GM seems okay on principle with this statement, generally for the aristocratic population, but insists I have at best an idea of what Sir Aristo looks like from rumors, but nothing else. Okay, noted. As GM previously took a long time describing a specific shop near ours, the group decides to go there, and asks if they know more about where Sir Aristo lives. GM tells us it's closed, and nobody is there to answer. They explain we met the smugglers in the middle of the night, and that the streets are empty, except for soldiers enforcing a curfew at night. The group then decides to go to sleep until morning, feeling stuck, and not wanting to get grabbed by soldiers. But GM explains that we cannot do that either. Not if we want to honor our deal with the smugglers. Why? Because we need to deliver the wooden box to Sir Aristo, then get something back from him and bring it back to the smugglers to get the reward. And all that before the middle of the morning, when the smugglers shall leave. Ha, that changes a lot of things, but we still don't know where to go, and everything is closed, and the streets are deserted and under curfew. The group still decides to wait until the sun rises, but GM apparently doesn't want us to time jump to sun rising and wants us to roleplay the wait. At this point, half of the game time is already consumed, and nothing happened. The weapons merchant, played by someone that is usually a bit murder hobo in their sessions, proposes that we open the wooden box to get an eye on the inside. This makes sense. We are waiting, with nothing to do, nobody to talk to, and nothing is happening anyway. The only thing of interest is this box. GM tells us we cannot. First, because the seal would be broken, and the deal is to bring it unopened. And second, because, they say, our characters find out that we physically cannot open it. Intrigued by this statement, I just say that my merchant has an eye on the wooden box, with their expert eye, jewelry and clockwork. GM tells me the type of wood it is in, gives us a long description of the craftsmanship of the box, and the probable source of the rare wood, which apparently tells us nothing useful about the item for reasons. I say that I inspect it further, shaking it, looking at it closely, investigating the mechanism, the seam, etc., to see how it could theoretically be opened, with no intention of opening it. GM tells us I get no info out of it, that there is no seam. This is just one piece of wood, with nothing moving in it if shaken. Is it even a box then? How do we know this is a box? I'm mentioning the tools for delicate work I have in my shop, but apparently they are not of any help. We ask again to the GM if we can skip to the sun rising, and this time they are okay with it. We go to the previously long detailed shop that is now open to ask for directions, but we learn absolutely nothing out of the shopkeeper. Like us, they know nothing. For some reason, they are annoyed at our presence in the shop. The group then decides to go to the first tavern we can find to ask for directions, but GM says the tavern is closed. It only opens later in the morning. We then argue a bit with the GM. The group says, okay, we wait for the tavern to open, or we go to whichever tavern opens first, or anywhere else we could have info from. If needed, we even try every person in the street, and every sort of shop or whatever until something works. GM finally lets us have an open tavern, but an empty one that does not serve customers. We get a long description of the tavern, we get a long description of the tavern owner and their history in the city. We ask him for directions. The tavern owner is clearly annoyed at us being there while they try to open the tavern. He wants us to come back later, or at least pay for a drink or something before asking anything. So, we do, but we need to wait for them to finish opening the tavern. We do wait. We get a description of how it happens. Then we order drinks. But there is almost nothing to drink due to the siege. So apparently the drinks are terrible and not worth the money. Flock. Then, we are finally asking for the directions we need. And we get none. The tavern owner just gives us no valuable information. They just don't know. Nothing. Not even a general direction. At this point, there is only less than 1 hour before 23 hours. So we forcefully pause the game and ask the GM if they are okay. If we've progressed at all, because we have the feeling that we are completely and utterly stuck. And that we need their help to guide us to where we need to be at, to get to the fun parts. GM explains they weren't expecting us to go to a tavern at all, but that we are on schedule, that they have troubles as they are new to GMing and get a bit nervous, but that things are fine. It's clear that all players are now annoyed and want something interesting to happen. I say this with sympathy to the GM. Can you please put us on the path, or even bring us to the right place directly? Let's skip the rest of the walk if we can. I don't know for others, but I feel we wandered enough, and that we are now ready to go to the delivery scene with Sir Aristo. To which GM says, okay, your characters know that all aristocrats live in the higher part of the city. GM adds that it's a plot point that we don't know exactly which house it is from the start though, because it is a big city. And we cannot know everybody's houses. Okay, annoying. They don't want to jump to the interesting part directly, but at least they gave us our first lead. I propose the following. You agreed I have aristocrat clients through their servants. Can I please visit quickly one said client's servants to get an address for the delivery? GM agrees. We walk to the higher district and get 3 long descriptions. The beautiful high walls around this aristocratic district, the beautifully armored guards guarding all doors in the wall that apparently have the martial ability to transform us all into red paste if they wanted, and finally, the beautiful aristocratic district architecture style. Finally, I go to the door of my aristocratic client to ask for the servant I had a previous transaction with. But no, they are not here, and the person speaking to me does not trust me enough to speak with me. The servant I'm looking for is not there, and they refuse to tell me where to find them. Nobody wants to give us the flocking address of Sir Aristo either. At this point, I don't know anymore. The group don't know either what to do anymore. We are annoyed. Nothing we proposed made the plot progress. Is that some sort of special hell where there's no agency and no point? One of us goes to ask the guards at the city doors, but they don't want to speak to common people about aristocrats' whereabouts. One of us says their character wants to start asking everybody and anybody in the streets. Another says they will try every door until we find the right manner. We start to get chaotic. We want to stir it up. We have something like 15 minutes of session left before the 23rd hour, so I guess it will take at least 30 plus minutes to wrap it up, or an hour. But I won't accept an hour extension and decide I will leave at the 23rd hour in 30 minutes, whatever happens. This is too much unfun. Seeing that we started acting all chaotic, GM suddenly tells me I meet with the servant I was searching for. Oh yes, fucking finally, something. Servant is described as very annoyed to see me. No shit. Reluctantly, servant agrees to give me the flocking address, finally, but not easily. It took some solid RP persuasion from my end, for whatever reason. We got the address. We can finally start the fetch quest. Only took almost 3 hours of intense nothing happening. How did we not leave the table already? We finally go to the address. We are finally facing the closed door of the manor of Sir Aristo to deliver the wooden box that cannot be opened, not even inspected. Some servant opens to us, but of course does not want to let us in, because we are not expected. We don't have a rendezvous. As players, we are annoyed. One of us proposes that we just throw the wooden box over the shoulder of the servant in the manor through the semi-open door and call it a day. We argue with the asshole servant and convince them to let the two of us meet the master, Sir Aristo, as all 4 is too much for them. We then have a long description of the manor interior, then a long description of the master's office. We have a long description of the master. He is handsome, elegant, has nice clothes, and he looks fucking pissed at us. Of course he's another asshole. He apparently radiates a main character's aura and has big dick energy. He says he is annoyed to have to speak to us. I guess we also are. Very much. He takes the wooden box while acting like a Karen about the fact we were so slow at delivering it. He opens it, takes something inside of it, replaces it with something else, closes the box. He then says that whatever is now inside is more important than our lives, but he refuses to elaborate. He refuses to explain what, or why, or how, or anything. Refuses to explain what he took from it either. We tell the GM that at least we must have seen what he took, what he put, or how to open or close the box, right? Visual cues or anything? Solid no. Apparently, Sir Aristo turned his back to us, and we know and saw nothing. It was too fast, and we are too dumb to understand what happened. We then get kicked from the manor, as our presence is now insufferable for Sir Aristo, with again, the wooden box in hands. It's almost the 23rd hour, like 22 and 55 minutes. Okay, we did it. It was fucking awful and unfun, and full of assholes, meaningless encounters, and we got no satisfaction out of it. But at least there would be no extended time, I thought to myself. No need to narrate the annoying backtracking to go back to the smugglers, right? And now comes the guessing game to today's story. Will the GM A, take them directly to the smugglers with no fuss and give them an awesome reward, or B, pluck out his own eyes and eat them in front of the players, or C, completely waste the parties, and by extension our time, by forcing us to listen to more of this horrible story? Submit your answers now. Time's up! As much as I would have preferred if this GM chose B, unfortunately, the answer was C. And with that, let's find out how this story ends. But the GM still narrates and describes. The second we set foot outside, the whole district is locked up. Guards are plenty, buzzing and lining everybody. They apparently search for something with intensity. Clearly, they search for the MacGuffin wooden box. I then go to a guard to ask what they are searching for, while acting suspect on purpose. I have the box in the pocket, mind you. Yes, I'm entering asshole mode, to get at least some fun out of this ordeal. I wanted some agency, even if it was to get the fucking box lost to the guards and me decapitated. Let me have something. Guess what? Guard is annoyed at me, refuses to speak with me, does not want to look at my pockets, wants just me to go away and leave them alone. Tells me to go to the main gate if I want to leave the district. Tells me to go to the main gate if I want to leave the district, but that I will be searched there. Tempting. But one of us proposed that we just leave the box on the ground and go back to our miserable, hungry lives. Another proposes that we just yeet it above the wall. It's small and light. Of course, GM says no. And it's suddenly the 22nd hour at the 59th minute. GM says that we will stop now because it's almost the 23rd hour. They ask us if we are available same time next week. Short, general silence. I'm asking if we can wrap this up in like 10 minutes, as this was supposed to be only one session, and looks like we are finished soon anyway. That I can personally stretch it to 30 minutes max. GM immediately gets very anxious. No. They speak suddenly very fast. Very fast. They stress the fact that they need to stop at the 23rd hour. Exactly. That they need at least another session to make us go through everything. When the 23rd hour comes, they abruptly disconnect. Mid-discussion. With a, "Sorry, I have to leave now." Like if they were on a self-imposed parental control set at the 23rd hour, or transformed back into a pumpkin. So weird. On the Discord chat, the group said no to any other session. I took 10 minutes the next day to provide feedback to help them grow as a new GM. Not for me, not for them, but for their potential next table of players to maybe suffer less than us this time. I insisted on the importance of agency and collaboration with players, and of shutting your GM mouth regularly to let players speak and do things, and to accept them and rebound on them. Feedback to which they never answered. And that was my last interaction with them, ever. This was the most pointless adventure ever. Nothing the party did mattered. Nothing the players said mattered. I'd say this GM wrote a book instead of a game, but at least the book has a plot. Whatever the hell this GM was, please don't be anything like them in your games. And with that, let's put a close to this story. And if for some reason you enjoyed today's stories and would like to see more of them, then beat the like button for lunch money and obliterate that subscribe button. And if you made it this far, why not leave a comment? Can't think of a comment? Then leave the comment, decisions, so I know you made it to the end of today's video. Thank you to my patrons and members for supporting me, which you too can become by hitting the join button or following the link in the description to my Patreon. That way, you too can join the Burb aristocracy and become one of my counts of Quills, like Reuven, Eryn Kados, Kirito Kazuto, Critical Kunic, Evix, King Drazil, Christian Pipp, Cosmosis, Rykis, Vincent, Hailey Thompson, Zerofang, and Netscape Navigator. Or perhaps you can become a Baron of Beaks, like Captain Rel, Koumori Fiore, Shane Benjamin, Hgean Kid Nebula, Liminal Ark, Kieran Slater, Running Bear 2525, Ginga Ninja, Hailey McAuliffe, Brittney Marrs, Rathiana the Nerd, Sara Warren, Specter Spark, Ars Torok, Ghost Legion, Mr. Hypocritical, Jesse Shodell, Kuntos Weasel, Tech Blog, Chorister, Cardispawn, Jester King, Lord Rend, Wormy, Den of the Drake, Mick Eatley, and Anya. And for some reason, if you want to give $10 or more, you could be a Duke of Feathers, like a Repetitive Debug, Elf, Craycard, Hexblading, Kive Mind, The School Bus, Mirage Vaxis, Quinn, Jared Soar, Blues Otters, Jared Zemlin, Doc Salty 96, Matthew Mulqueeny, and of course my good pal, Acroth. And with all of that out of the way, I'll see you next time. Though I hope you don't mind the wardrobe change, as the crow flies.